So throughout this course, we're going to be building our app from data. We're not going to be building the data in the sheet up from scratch. So I want to take you through the sheet that we're working from and also point you to a place where you can actually download that sheet or copy it and start if you're following along with this rebuild from scratch. So we have the sheet here. We have a number of tabs which we'll see throughout the course of this video, but the ones that we're going to be working on in this video is the courses sheet and the videos sheet. So the way that this is working is that we have the course title, the abstract of the course, the description, the image for the course, the level, how long the course is, a very simple rating which you can do just in terms of emojis, and then a boolean which says whether this course is premium or not. And that is going to be used later on to kind of filter different things and show different things to different users. So if we look at this first course, Photoshop Ultimate, right, and then we go over to the videos sheet here, what we'll see is that all of these items here are videos that belong in the Photoshop Ultimate course. And this is what we'll be using later to connect them. We'll be using a relation to connect them. Now, if you notice in this sheet here, this is all obviously dummy content. These aren't real courses. We've only really got the videos for two courses. We've got videos for Photography Basics and Photoshop Ultimate. If we go back here, we've actually got a bunch of other kind of fake courses. So if you're using this app or you're creating your own version of this, you will be able to kind of just add all the videos that you want in here for a new course. Let's just call this new course. And you'd add, a bunch of them in here. You'd add the titles in there, the lecture number, which helps you order it later on in a list, description, the video for each lecture, and the image. And then once you've done that, you just create the new course, one single item here, and you'd add all of its properties. And then later on in the data editor, you'll see how those connect up. So essentially the videos belong inside of courses, okay? And this is fairly self-explanatory as well. So that is what we're going to be building in this section of the course. We're going to keep it really simple. We're just going to build the courses page. The other thing worth noting about throughout this entire series is I'm going to keep 3 tabs open in Chrome. I'm going to have on the furthest right-hand side the fully finished template, and this will be in the dark theme, the dark mode theme that we have. And the actual app that we're going to be rebuilding, I'll keep in the light theme, so it's really obvious when we're switching between the two, because we want to have the finished app as a reference and then the one we're working on as the one we're working on. So that will be in the first tab. So we'll have the first tab as the one that we're working on, the second tab as the sheet with the data, and the third one as the fully finished template. Okay, so let's go ahead and generate our app from our sheet. So we're using a sheet called Insider's Rebuild here. So we're going to look for that in here. And if we can't see it, we can see it. There we go. So I just want to show you something. If we go back to the fully finished template, the home screen on this app, if we go to the layout section, the home screen is a fairly complex home screen. First of all, we're in the details layout. So we're not looking at a list, but we are looking at many different lists on a single page, right? So these are all inline lists. Articles is an inline list. Podcasts is an inline list, and we have text components. There's a lot of stuff going on here. So this is quite a complex screen to build from scratch. And actually it relies on data from lots of different sources. We've got articles, podcasts, resources, courses, things like that. So it doesn't make sense to start with that. And what we're going to be building is throughout the next few videos, the different screens, the different collections, and then in a later video, we'll bring all of those together on this home screen. So let's go back to our rebuild and see what's happened. So you can see that obviously Glide has looked at the first tab of our sheet. If I go over to our sheet now, and go to the home sheet, we can see the Glide is basically tried to turn this into a page for us. And it doesn't quite work, obviously, because our home screen is going to be very custom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to head over to the tabs area, and I'm actually going to delete this. It doesn't matter because there's not anything custom on here that we've worked on yet. I'm also going to delete videos because we're not going to need those. And I'm also going to delete articles, right? And you can see that there's like a bunch of other things in here in the menu that that Glide has also generated, but we can look at those later. So all we're going to be working on in this video is the courses screen, okay? So let's start by creating the really nice layout that we have on the courses screen of the fully finished template here. We have this nice cards layout showing a lot of information in overlays and things like that. So let's go over to our rebuild, and I'm going to go to the layout picker and I'm going to choose the cards layout. And then the next thing that we want to do is sort of sort out these properties here. So Glide's done a great job at finding the different things the different properties in our sheet and assigning them to these this data section here, I'm going to swap out the details to be the length of the course, because that's what we had. The next thing we want to do is work with overlays. So I'm going to scroll down inside of the cards layout until we get to the overlays section. What we want is we want the favorite button to be on each item, and that brings up this favorites list here, where if users favorite an item, that'll be specific to them. We'll go over more about that kind of user specific stuff later. And then we want a tag as well, and the tag is going to be the level of the course. Okay, so that's it. Really simple. List screen. This is going to be the style that we use throughout the app. Cards layout. You can do a ton more with cards. Like, for example, you could change the size so that it's half size, so you get this kind of 2-column thing. You can change the style of the cards without a shadow. We're going to keep it like this, but you can obviously customize it however you want. So now we need to sort out the details screen. And the details screen is when you click on an item, we go to the information for that one single row. If we click on the top item here, we can see that we've got a kind of auto-generated version of this. Let's go over to our fully finished template and see what's going on over here. So I'm going to click on Photoshop Ultimate. What we've got is we've got the photo up at the top. Let me just switch to layout here so that you can see all the components. We've got the photo up at the top in an image component. We've got text components showing the kind of title and subtitle. We've got rating component, basic table, and a bunch of other things down here, including 3 inline lists. And this is kind of one of the more in-depth parts of this app, where users can see all lectures, they can see their favorite lectures and unwatched lectures, and those lists will be filtered in different ways, and we'll get to that. So let's go ahead and start rebuilding that detail screen. Let's go back to our rebuild app, and I'm actually going to delete most of the things that are here because they're not needed. So the first thing that we wanted, actually before we get to that, I just want to show you something up at the top here. So in our finished template, we had the title of the course, I believe, up at the top here. Yeah, Photoshop Ultimate. If we go back to our rebuild, what's happened is that we've got the screen title is coming from perhaps a different property. We don't really want that. A lot of people miss this in Glide, actually, is that when you go onto a details screen, that details screen has a title up at the top, and you can call that whatever you want. If you wanted it to be the same for each page, you could just write a word in here and it would be the same for each item. If we go to another item, it will just say the same, right? But what we can do is, with this little menu here, the 3 dots, we can choose a column from the actual row that we're in. And that makes a lot more sense for detail screens, at least to me. So we want the course title to be the title for each item. If we go back now, we go on to Photography Basics, that's going to say Photography Basics, obviously, right? But you may want another property, which is why we give you that option. Okay, so let's start adding components. The first thing that we need is an image component. I'm going to search for image, and I'm going to connect it. Well, it's automatically connected already. I believe we wanted the 3:2 ratio. I think that was it. Also notice that on the list layout, we used overlays, right? You could add overlays on this image as well. So we could have the favorite here. We could have the tag here as well for the level of the course. It's up to you. I'm going to leave those out because we didn't have it on the fully finished template. Let's go back to our component list, and I'm going to add a text component. So the text component, as of recording this video, is a reasonably new component, and it's really flexible. There's a lot of things that people often miss in terms of what you can do with the layout. So I'm going to choose headline 1, really nice big one here, and I'm going to make it center. And I'm also going to then duplicate that, and I'm going to connect it again. I'm going to connect it to the abstract of the course, right? But I'm going to make it really, really small. So we're going to choose the footnote style. So next we want to allow users to rate this course. So I'm going to go and add the rating component here. Now, the thing about ratings, as you are probably aware, is that they need to be specific to each user, right? So what we need to do now is create a user-specific column so that the data for this component is going to be unique to each user. So I'm going to head over to the data editor, and I'm going to go to the courses sheet here, and I'm going to add a new column, right? And this column is going to be a basic column, and we're going to choose number because the rating component just works with numbers. And I'm going to make it user specific. So if I click this now, we're going to get this pop-up, and Glide is saying that your sheet needs a row ID. And this is something we'll see throughout pretty much every collection sheet in this app. We need row IDs for things like favorites and also for user specific columns. And row IDs, if you're not sure, is just a kind of code that Glide generates and then puts in your sheet to help Glide keep track of that row, because sometimes in sheets you can move rows around, things get deleted, and sometimes if that happens, Glide or any software could actually lose where that row is because it's hard to identify a row. So if we click add row ID, we'll get this new column here, it'll populate, and we'll have these kind of long strings in there. And that will also be inside of our sheet. If we go to the courses sheet, we'll see this row ID here. So you don't want to delete this column, you want to keep it as is. Okay, cool. So let's go back and then finish adding that column. I'm just going to call it user rating. And I'm going to change the precision to just be 1 because we don't need the decimal places. Great, okay, done. That's the user rating. So now we just need to connect that to the component. So I'm going to go to the rating component and I'm going to select the data. I'm going to go to user rating. And now, as you're aware, if I'm logged in as me, let's say I rate this as a 3 out of 3, and then I go to joe@glideapps.com, it's going to be a completely different rating, right? So Joe is 2, whereas I am 3, okay? So our user-specific stuff is set up, and we could change this to 5 as well. Next, we need to add a basic table component. And a basic table component is one of those often overlooked components because it kind of seems kind of boring and simple, but a basic table component can really display data in a nice, simple, easy way. Anytime that you find in your app you're just displaying properties so that people can view them, you might want to consider using a basic table component because it kind of keeps things really neat. If we go back to our fully finished template here, we can see that we've got 3 properties: the length, the level, and the overall rating, right? And that is probably a lot better to just put in a really simple basic table component rather than using up lots of space. So let's go back to our rebuild and we'll connect those properties. So we want the length first, we want the level, and then we want the overall rating. And I'll talk about this in a minute because it's a bit confusing. We've got these different ratings going on here. This is going to be the average rating, right? And this is something that you might want to display overall in your app, whereas this is a specific rating for the user. This is the average overall rating. So naturally what you might be thinking is, can we take all of the user-specific ratings, average them, and then display them in the app? And the answer is, as of recording this video, no, not yet, but we will be able to do that very soon. So I'm just giving you this simple column where you can display the rating there in kind of just emoji stars, right? So next we need to add this switch here, add course to my library. And it's a switch component, but I want you to notice that it's connected to the is favorited column. Now, this might be a bit strange. Let's look at something to hopefully make this a bit clearer. If we go to one of our items here, we can see that we've got the favorite button going on. And hopefully you're familiar with favorites now. If we go in the data editor, we can see that we have that column, right? We actually have access to it. We didn't create it, it just got created by the favorite component. But what we can do is because it's a Boolean, we can actually use that column in other places. So instead of seeing a favorite component here, what we've got is a switch component, which we've connected to the is favorited column, right? So it acts in exactly the same way as a favorite on or off. And what we're using instead is a switch. It's just another way of doing it. So we're going to do that in our app. And when we've got that switch, we can use it later on in the kind of My Profile area to show users only the courses that they've added. So we're going to go over here. We're going to add a new component, switch, and we're going to connect it to the is favorited column, right? False. Okay, that's all we need to do for this, and later on we'll use it. There is actually one thing, I lie. We need to say add course to my library. And that's it. So later on what we'll do is we'll make this component actually power the kind of My Profile area where you can sort all of your own stuff. But for now we can just leave it as is. So the last thing that we need to do is the inline lists, which display all the lectures in this course. And to do that, before we do that, what we need is a relation, right? We need to relate all of the items, or sorry, all of the videos that belong in this course to this course. So I'm going to go over to the data editor and I'm going to add a new column here, and I'm going to add a relation column. And I'm going to call this, we could call this lectures. Okay, so we want to relate to items where the value in the course's title matches the value in the videos sheet in the course title column, right? So all the videos with the course title of Photoshop are going to be connected to the course Photoshop, for example, right? And the final thing that's always easy to miss, you can always check here. So there's only one item being brought back, is match multiple. If we do that, we can see that there's a number of items being brought back. Okay, cool. And as I mentioned earlier, we're not seeing all of the other items for all of these other dummy courses because we haven't got lectures there. But as soon as you added lectures and your own, those relations would start working. Okay, so let's add our inline list. I'm going to go back to the layout area. I'm going to add a new component, which is an inline list. And what we're going to do is we're just going to add one, even though in the finished app we have 3 different inline lists. I'm just going to add one, customize that, and then duplicate it. Makes things a lot quicker. So we had the tiles layout for this list, and we had 3 tiles per row. If we just look back at what we're trying to create here, we're trying to create this. We had 3 tiles per row, and we had not rounded corners, we had sharp corners, and the ratio of the tile shape was a little bit bigger than this, so let's choose 4:3. We didn't have the description, we just had some text going on here. Glide's already found the image, so that's great. And then we had the text style as an overlay, so it was inside and I think at the lower left, right? We could probably make the text a bit smaller. Yeah, that's right. Text is a bit smaller, and all caps titles. There we go. I think that's pretty much the style that we were after. Now we've got this list title here up at the top. In the finished app, we had all lectures as the list title because that's going to show the person who's looking at these 3 lists, hey, this is all lectures, this is my favorite lectures, and this is unwatched lectures. So let's go back to that list and we'll change the title in. And again, you can change this title to not just be a custom title, you can change it to be a row for that item. We don't need to do that in this case, but it's just worth remembering that very often in fields or text fields in the builder, you have this option to be able to choose from other contexts or values from other contexts. So we're going to change this to all lectures. So before we duplicate this list, what we want to do is we'll work on the details screen so that we, again, don't have to redo all of this work. So I'm going to go to all lectures, click introduction, and we're going to start working on this screen here. If we go over to the fully finished template though, let's look at what we're trying to do. So we're going to have a video, we're going to have a title, a favorite button, a watched button, or switch rather, and then private notes. And these 3 are user specific. Okay, so let's go back to the rebuild. It's getting pretty close, which is great. I'm going to delete this course name here, lecture number, and actually this link as well. And we're going to add the favorite component. And I'm also going to then add a switch. Always spell that wrong. And then I'm going to add a notes. Now, we don't have user-specific columns for this yet, so I'm going to do that. But I wanted to just talk a little bit about the row ID thing. You're going to need row IDs throughout your app because anytime you have user-specific stuff like favorites, switches, and private notes and things like that, you're going to need row IDs. So I'm actually just going to go to the data editor myself. Rather than getting Glide to prompt me, I'm going to go to the data editor, I'm going to go to the videos, and we haven't got a row ID going on at the moment, but I'm just going to add one manually myself. So I'm going to go here, choose row ID, and then I'm just going to hit done, right? And this means that now Glide won't get confused between the different things you favorited and kind of and bookmarked and things like that if rows change. So we already have a is favorited column, and this is created every time you add a favorite component, but we need a watched, or we need a column which is a switch or a Boolean for whether someone has watched that lecture, and that needs to be user specific. So we're going to add a column, we're going to choose Boolean as the type, and we're going to call it watched lecture, and we're going to make it user specific. And as we've already added a row ID, we don't get that prompt, okay? So I'm going to hit done, and then I'm going to click one more time, and I'm going to add a basic column, a basic text column, and this is going to be user specific, and I'm going to call it private notes, or let's say private lecture notes, and we'll hit done. Great, so let's go back to the layout. And now we can connect these components. The favorite's already connected to the favorite column. That's automatic, we don't have to do that. Let's go to the switch, and we want this to be watched lecture, okay? Now we change the title to be, what did we put in the fully finished template? Let's have a quick look. Watched, just simple, okay? So let's go back to the rebuild. I'm gonna title this watched, or you could say mark as watched. And then we can change the column for the private notes as well. Okay, cool, so let's test this out. I'm currently logged in as me, right? And I'm gonna favorite this lecture, mark it as watched, and put Jack's private notes. And I'm gonna hit done, okay? Now, if we switch over to Joe at Glide Apps, we can see that none of those are the same. They're all completely different, okay? So we've set up user-specific stuff, and later on we'll be able to kind of do stuff with this. So now what we can do is we can build those two inline lists for unwatched lectures and my favorite lectures, because we've set up all the data correctly. So I'm gonna go back to the main list, and I'm gonna scroll down to this inline list, and I'm gonna duplicate it twice. So the top list, we're going to have three lists. We're going to have, the top one is going to be unwatched lectures, this one is going to be your favorite lectures, and this one is just going to be all lectures. So we're going to filter these top two. So let's go to this first one, and we'll rename it, and we'll call it unwatched lectures. And all we need to do is go over to the features panel here and add a filter. And what we're going to do is we're going to say watched is not true. And what that's going to do is it's going to show us all of the lectures that haven't been watched. So if you look at this lecture here, which is the use Photoshop's interface efficiently, if I go into that and then I watch it, and then we go back, we're not going to see it anymore. So this is the way that the user can go in and watch the lectures and then see what they've covered. The next one is this next one here is going to be our favorite lectures, and we're going to filter that in a different way. So we're going to go into that list, we're going to call it favorite lectures, and we're going to go to the features panel, and we're going to add a filter, and this is going to be is favorited is true. So we have favorited one lecture as this user, but if we change to another user, me, I have also favorited a different one. And if I go into this lecture here and I favorite this, what's new in Photoshop, and we go back, we're going to then see that in that area there. So that is the course experience. Fair amount of stuff going on there. We created the course list, we created the course details page, which had some interesting user-specific stuff going on it. And we also created 3 inline lists showing the lectures and then filtering those in different ways. That's probably the most complex part of the app, apart from maybe the home screen later on. Luckily, the next few lectures are going to be a bit more simple, doing the articles page and the resources page. So I'll see you there.